Good morning, LinkedIn friends. Welcome to another day of Value First Framework series. I'm Chris Carolyn, and I'm here with Danielle Urban. How you doing today, Danielle?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Doing well. I think you lucked out. You probably get the juiciest, trap Value First combo to talk about. It definitely resonates with everybody that I've talked to, and it came from a place of seeing a post a while back, somebody creating this elaborate scheme to find another way to show the value of what marketing's doing, and maybe we connect it to, the revenue, do this and that. And I'm just like, it's not going to matter when you show up to the conversation and sales is just playing by a different set of rules. Like they don't have to do any of this, and they're automatically connected to the ROI.
Right.
Like it's just why do we keep doing this work? And it started, so as I created these principles in the trap, it's like the trap is thinking that marketing can play the same game that sales gets to play. And and what we need to, how we can help organizations like move out of that and see that, right?
Mhm.
Because you might be looking at the same metrics, or now we're all connected to revenue, but when that is in place and we're basically treating different parts of the org, differently.
Mhm.
It's really hard to overcome that. So today we're going to be talking about this trap and ways to get out of it. Um, but kind of a softball here for you. But like, what is actually happening in practice when we see these separate teams, marketing and sales, service, all optimizing differently, right? And what does the customer feel at the end of the day?
Yeah, well, I have a great story to really launch us into this because in my last full-time position, a full-time role that I had a bonus that was tied to marketing generated leads. We were constantly going back and forth on like, what is a marketing generated lead? How much does marketing play into this lead being meaningful to our business? And I had my personal income tied to that. And it was really awful to like sit there and hash it out. And I was like negotiating on what marketing's piece of that was. And it was like, I don't want to waste 2 days of like modeling out what the value of my work is essentially, but really like how I'm contributing to growing the business when like it's obvious that these things are resonating.
Oh man, and that's the trap right there.
That's the whole thing.
Like you spend 2 days not creating value, like
Right.
basically. And like, are we ever successful in actually showing the value when we spend those 2 days, right? Not usually,
What
right?
end?
Right, because we have this way of thinking, like no matter, especially when it's a sales-led org,
Yeah.
right? Like sales creates the value, like marketing supports, and it's very hard to break free from that. And we build it into our dashboards, we build it into the reporting, we build it into the meetings,
Mm-hmm.
where marketing has to like beg to be a part of these meetings while everybody's complaining about misalignment, right?
Right.
And just putting everybody in their role, like, and everybody's just going to be in this factory, and we all work
Mm-hmm.
together, and blah blah blah. Meanwhile, like, and this is definitely I'm going to focus a lot, like all the examples are related to marketing versus sales situations, but when you create this complexity, it makes sense that the best salespeople are like, no, I'm just opting out of this
Yeah.
because my 100% of my paycheck relies on me getting the job done with our customers and our prospects, and like create whatever system you want. But
Yeah.
this is the game I got to play, right? For
Mm-hmm.
me and my KPIs, right? So hopefully we can help today, like just identify, like this is not an easy fix, obviously. And the whole point of this value first framework is to help move from optimization, which is what we're often trying to do when we set up KPIs of like, okay, we'll do MQLs over here, and then we got SQLs, and then right, we're
Mm-hmm.
gonna align, and even to the point of like, I love the idea of compensating each team based on outcomes, right? But those kind of activity outcomes of MQLs that might not matter to the rest of it, like it's the wrong way. And hopefully we can highlight what this trap looks like and just give you the tools to talk about it meaningfully in the organization, because it is a path to change. Luckily, there's AI enablement now that can allow you to change fairly quickly, but you just have to recognize, which way to go. And it starts with the need framework. And thanks to George B. Thomas on this one to really formalize, because even though it's very easy to highlight all the measurement traps and problems, when the whole B2B infrastructure is built around this concept of funnel and MQLs, SQLs, and leads, it's very hard to describe a future without that stuff in it, right? So he highlighted the need framework at some point, and that stands for the N is for natural collaboration, E for enhanced humans, the second E for elevated value, and D for distributed empowerment. So we're going to run through those real quick. First, natural collaboration versus artificial control, right? So lead scoring and departmental KPIs are ultimate artificial control. Right.
Those are great examples.
And so take us through like some example like that you felt, but also what does the natural, trying to enable natural collaboration, what does that measurement look like instead?
Yeah, it's funny because there are so many parallels to the multiple conversations and recordings I've done about attribution, because it always comes down to like, well, how do you know it was marketing that did it, or how do you know that it was sales that did it, and how do you pull all of those data points together to create a story where you can see in front of you with numbers that all of this adds up to revenue. And like when you drop one in, like you're saying, the factory, drop a lead in the top, and then when we put it through these paces, we can expect these conversion rates, we can get all the way to the end, we can do that predictably. Not to delve too far into like a philosophical conversation about how we got here, but it does feel like some of that is just driven by the SaaS metrics that a lot of investment is expecting. So like when you get money, you need to take $1 and turn it into $3, and you need to be able to measure that and do it predictably, and that's how you grow. But because I don't want to get too far off track there, let's bring it back. And I think running towards those KPIs that are so specifically defined really loses context, because like you were saying with MQLs, if you're aiming at an MQL target, if that is the meaningful metric for your team and that's not a meaningful metric to somebody else, well, then you're going to create your own dynamic and your own definition of what that is to hit your target. But you're not thinking about that downstream or upstream and how you can use that information to collaborate across teams. You're just aiming at like, did our team hit our goal? And that is missing so much context for what happens in the rest of the business. Because if you're hitting an MQL target, but revenue is declining, like nobody wins. Like, I don't care if you hit your target. It's not helpful.
Yeah. And oh man, this is where it's like the natural, collaboration part is when, like, it's so easy to point this out on LinkedIn, right? Mm-hmm. Which when it works, it's very obvious. You can't measure any of it though. Like it's so hard to like bring that into a system. And that's where like, let's say anybody on the team can make a post that says something about the value that the business creates or highlights another person. And then somebody comments and it's a technical question. Mm-hmm. And now the SME or the salesperson can just come in and like, that's natural collaboration. Yeah. Who gives a shit? Like if that's the MQL or who started it or whatever, right? It's like, does the pipeline get created? Right.
Right.
And that is taken away when everybody has these individual scorecards. And I've literally heard, marketing, sales, and service people tell me why they don't engage on LinkedIn more or why they don't use LinkedIn more. And every single time it's related to some activity like KPI that they're supposed to be doing,
Yeah.
right? Like calls or emails. So it's a hard trap, but that's what that looks like. Uh, and what we're doing, leads to this next E, or the first E, which is enhanced human capability, like versus dependency, right? And like it's pretty obvious that our current metrics almost disable people from understanding what actually creates the value, or certainly gets in the way of them doing the things that actually create value, instead of just being like, oh, if it doesn't show up on this dashboard, right, nobody's going to care about it.
Yeah. Well, and continuing with this MQL example, it's a great one because if you're so hyper focused on that, then you as a human functioning in your role truly lose sight of the activities that you can do, because you get so shoehorned into the things that are measurable and the things that are trackable. Like you're saying, if you aren't going to engage on LinkedIn because you have to spend your time hitting your minimum calls for the day, like nobody wins there. And so when you actually break free of that and you create space where you don't have to track every activity, you get so much more creativity in the mix. You can do really cool things and really interesting things that just sort of build over time and maybe aren't directly measurable, but you get visibility, you get a memorable moment for people. And that's truly why I got into marketing in the first place, way back when I was little baby in college. I was like, I want to do marketing because there's a creativity element, there's a measurement element, there's like a psychology and understanding how people work element to it. And that's the human piece of marketing. But we've gotten so focused on the things that are measurable because there was so much we could measure. And so now we have to sort of pull back from, we can track every LinkedIn post, we can track every like, we can associate it to their contact record, which you can't. And because we can't do that, people get really frustrated. But we know, you and I especially, the content that you put out on LinkedIn and the way that you engage with your community as a true real person and not just a bot that answers to hit the metrics makes a massive, massive difference. And my sort of human personality that I put out on LinkedIn gains me a lot of recognition and sort of comes back around where people find me approachable and like fun to follow. Not that I'm aiming for that, but like I'm just a weird person that makes stupid comments on LinkedIn, but people appreciate that. And so that brings that human element back and works out really well for my business. One of my biggest deals right now is because I left a comment on LinkedIn that was like, oh, hey, that's us. And just a really natural, casual moment. And it landed us like a 6-month deal that we're really excited about.
Yeah. Well, congrats on that, first of all. And right, that's an example. Like the human capacity is already there, the human capability, and we just like stifle it. And what you're describing, and oftentimes, like, I'll be honest, this is why it's like people like us don't like exist well inside of organizations, right? Because we aren't allowed to be ourselves. And honestly, like it's hard to watch like learned helplessness, like in person, right? And that's this very scary but very obvious thread that I'm seeing throughout all these traps. And I'm gonna keep pulling on that thread probably, because it's really at the core of a lot of like inability to move forward and act quickly and really leverage AI and transform in the way that we're describing. Because it's got to be a team effort. And when your team has been stifled from doing anything, like the ideas and they're the ones closest to the customers, and it's just we got to put them in a position to actually use their skills, because that leads to the second E here, which is elevated value creation, right? Versus optimization. Like again, like we're not aiming for optimizing things that don't work. And we do a lot of that stuff right now, right? And it doesn't matter how many scoring tools come out in HubSpot or how pretty you can make the journey mapping feature look, right? Like if your people aren't in a place to serve when they need to, right? And create this breakthrough value for each relationship as it shows up, or
Yeah.
use AI to support that at the same time, like you're not creating the space to like leverage all these tools that you say you want the ROI from, right? So, um, share an example of like maybe from your MQL days, or like focusing on relationships and breakthrough activity versus like, oh, optimizing, like how can I get to the MQL faster, or what comes to mind for you?
Yeah. Well, thankfully I've broken free of my MQL days. So we are in, green fields these days. But I really see that coming through all the time. Like my day is primarily spent when I'm not in meetings with clients and doing live streams, which I love so much. I'm hanging out in Slack communities. I'm hanging out on LinkedIn. And we built our own business, so we can do whatever we want, but we are not aiming at a number of leads or pipeline coverage because we haven't had to think about that. We have these big networks where we're really engaged with people, and I'm not tooting my own horn, but like our reputations carry value at this point because we keep showing up in an authentic way, and we don't need to measure it. We don't have to go to that point where it's like, well, let's make sure our pipeline for next year is set where we've got 3x pipeline by the end of Q3. We just don't have to, because every time, and we're flying by the seat of our pants a bit, but every time we get a little nervous about our pipeline, something else just naturally shows up. Some new referral, we make a new LinkedIn post that's like, hey, here's a problem we just worked on. And all of a sudden we've got 3 new discovery calls booked in the next 2 weeks. And that sort of feedback loop just keeps proving to me that we likely never have to go back to that model of, setting a certain number of leads or a certain number of contacts and a certain amount of pipeline coverage and all of this, because we have this data that shows us that doesn't have to exist to be successful. We are growing in the way that we want to. We're hitting our revenue goals in the way that we had hoped, even exceeding the revenue goals that we had initially set for this year, because we just keep showing up in an authentic way. And we're creating videos, we're talking about the things we're working on, we're helping other people, and all of that just comes back around. When you are a human that people like interacting with, and you have value to add in those conversations, whether it's just a personal relationship or an actual business problem, then it always comes back. And we've built a business on that so far. And I know that, folks at Emmy have done that as well. Emmy Collective, I think, just hired their first salesperson 3 years in. So they've had enough successful growth where their network is doing the work for them. And we all see that. Like, you show up and it comes back.
Oh man, that's just powerful to think about. And it obviously gets into our last piece of this like kind of mini framework, the D, distributed empowerment, right? Instead of forcing dependency on this, this funnel, I need 1,000 of these, so I can get 100 of these, so I can get 10 of these, right? Which is how no human ever moved through a buying journey, right?
Yeah.
And we sit here and we can't like break free from these models. And there's actually so much value that you just talked about that I can't even remember what I was going to come back with. But it's that space of like, just feel like, and I'm sorry, like this word just fits right now. And I'm not surprised that it comes from AI enablement, like the vibe, like vibe marketing or vibe, like growth, just being in it.
Yeah.
Right? The feedback loop.
Yeah.
Like, we don't need content calendars like we always have before, because we're in conversation. And even if like everybody has value to create in those moments when you're participating, because everybody, like, pick any of these traps, like you can apply it to almost any situation that shows up. And since everybody's dealing with this B2B space where we're just built on this old ideal that no longer works, people just want to know, like, you can just be there, like, and say, I hear you. Like, and that will be valuable to a lot of people. Right. And so yeah, like what how do you approach distributed empowerment from as a concept, like when you are, because so much of the work that you guys do in consulting, like to help people like navigate all this,
Yeah.
like like breaking free from silos, and this person does this and then this person does this and nobody can cross lanes ever, like people need a lot of help with that, goes counter to everything they've been taught, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think they're bring on the haters, because I'm sure there will be people, and I'm sure even people in my network that I'm very close with and would share a lot of these values will turn around and say, but the reality is we have to give our board the numbers. And that's true. But when it comes down to empowerment, and until we see a full paradigm shift, the reality is that you can just tell your sales team, go hang out on LinkedIn. Like, you can just create this culture where everybody has enough information and enough communication channels to show up in an authentic way that adds their flavor of value that still supports the business. And so even if you have 1,000-person company and like a 40-person sales team, you still can empower everybody to show up in the way that they can add value, because everybody's embedded in their own communities. I recently got new business cards and started handing them out to all my friends because I think they're really cool. And so like my friends who work in education, they're like, I have no idea what you do, but it has a maze on the back. That's cool. But now I handed one to my neighbor at the bus stop, and she was like, I went online and stalked you. And so now she knows what I do. Like, that is just a way where I'm embedded in a community that you would never expect in your sales pipeline. Like my neighbor who works in like drug development and biotech, absolutely not on our ICP, but she probably knows someone. She probably
Yes.
will see that opportunity at some point. And the fact that I have a great personal relationship with their family, and now they also know what I do for work and like me as a person, might come back around. But that's an example where I'm embedded in a community that is outside of the thing that I typically do. And everybody has those. You have all of the different ways that you're connected online, in person, the different groups that you're a part of, the sports teams that you might be a member of. So the way that you can show up in those spaces can blend with the value that you deliver through your work. And we're getting really philosophical here. So,
Yeah.
but I
Well,
stand by it. Like, you can show up and add value in so many different ways. And when you create an organizational culture that allows for all of that to be true, then you empower your entire team to make an impact in places where you might not expect that value to be accepted.
yeah. And all of that, like everything you just said, comes off as common sense to most people,
Right.
like when you're talking about it. So I'm going to go through the value first, measurement, vision, and commitments here. And these, probably more than any other, are designed to like just attack the things that we've been doing that get in the way in a very qualitative, like serendipitous, like you have to create the space that, like, for people to talk to other people about how awesome your video was, or to share, even though they have no interest in what you do.
Mm-hmm.
Now they know and they get exposed to it, right? So this is the toughest one, because it's always about KPIs when there's not great ways to measure, right?
Yeah.
But when we align on these as a team, and you can measure the revenue, you can measure the growth, you can measure people's happiness.
Mm-hmm.
Not measure is not the right word, but like feel it, right? You can feel it. Like people are enjoying their jobs, they're enjoying their time, they believe in the things that they're doing. So imagine, if you're listening to this wondering, we'll close on some steps you can take. But first, like, imagine this future, like at the end of the year, your organization could say these things, these 7 commitments. Number 1, we will measure collective impact over departmental attribution. We believe value emerges from collaboration across functions, not isolated departmental activities. Number 2, we will apply consistent evidence standards across all measurement. We believe traditional metrics often escape the scrutiny applied to new approaches, creating a biased playing field. We commit to demanding the same level of proof for established measurements, like trade shows, as we do for innovative ones, like spending time on LinkedIn. Number 3, we will create space for the unmeasurable alongside quantitative data. We believe some of the most important business factors resist simple quantification, yet significantly impact success. Number 4, we will embrace signals over scores. We believe complex realities cannot be reduced to simplistic numerical targets without losing critical context. Number 5, we will measure to learn rather than to justify. We believe measurement creates its greatest value through discovery and improvement rather than through judgment or evaluation. Number 6, we will value sustainable pace over artificial speed. We believe natural value creation has its own rhythm that doesn't always align with arbitrary deadlines. And number 7, we will focus on value realization over activity tracking. We believe what matters is the difference we make, not just what we do. Any of those resonate, more than the others?
Yeah, it's very idealistic and I love it. But I think the signals over scores is a fun one to think about because you've seen me talk about lead scoring. I'm a huge proponent of lead scoring being part of your organization and part of your processes, but it is a very small piece that makes it easier to discover what comes next. And I always caution my clients. I just had this conversation yesterday, like scores sound great in theory, but you need to get so much buy-in and be so careful with it that you need to understand it's an abstraction that we can maybe get to someday. And that the way that it gets used is not like a do or die benchmark KPI. It's a tool to help you go figure out what comes next and what the next natural step is to do to follow up with that person and dig into what they're doing. Why is their website visit higher? Like, where did they come from? But I think another one that I really like is creating space for the unmeasurable. With AI coming into play, you can much more quickly identify the story and tell the story of those cases where perhaps they didn't follow the MQL, SQL, whatever. Like, we had a deal that closed in the space of hours. We're going to tell that story forever because it was hilarious. But it was a friend from my network who came back around, needed help. And by that afternoon, we had a signed deal and a kickoff schedule the next day. And that you will never be able to measure the steps of like someone I've had a connection with for like 2.5 years now happened to come back around because they know that I can deliver value. And when you have the tools to help you tell that story, you can actually like dive in and give those case by case examples where it's not going to be the metric that matters. It's going to be the story that came with that one deal. And maybe you pick 3 a week to share in your marketing meeting or your leadership meeting or whatever it is, where you can just tell the narrative and also present whatever metrics you need to show that your team is on track. But, making that space for those stories to be interesting and true and understand the value that goes into that exciting deal that closed alongside the sort of hard metrics that everybody's going to have a really hard time abandoning.
Yeah, that's such a great example. Like, because that's the stuff that's just not allowed to happen when you have to say like, okay, let me go put this in the CRM. And
Right.
So we can take it through the stages and make sure it checks off all these boxes. When you can feel you're there, like, oh my God, I'm the best fit for this person right now. Let's set up. Are you available right now? Okay, let's do it. Let's talk about it. And like, that's the speed. Something that came out of the AI summit yesterday was speed is everything now. Mm-hmm. And we've been seeing that for a while, even before AI. Mm-hmm. The speed of response becoming just as important as price mm-hmm. to many customers, right? And this is where the systems that we've always had in place do not enable speed. They just
Right.
don't, right? Especially when we tie it to KPIs that people are compensated on,
Mhm.
right? Um, when at the end of the day, like if customers aren't giving you money, then nobody gets paid, right? Uh, so if somebody's listening or watching and is bought in, which we know they are, because everybody's feeling these, like it's just inherent to the way you've been asked to do things forever. Um, like what is something they can do when they recognize this friction? Where can they start?
Yeah, I think that culture shift has to be one of the first things. So making sure that you're creating an environment where everybody feels like they won't get their hands slapped if they say something slightly incorrect. Or if somebody goes and makes a really casual post that maybe isn't in line with your, brand persona in writing, great. Make it so that that can happen, because that's where you start to see the business value come back around of people being embedded in their communities as their authentic selves, and the way that they can deliver that message that fits the environment they're in, so that the trust can be built and the value can come back around. So that, like, step zero is creating that culture shift where that's allowed to happen. And it's usually unspoken. Nobody's really breathing down your neck on, brand persona. But when you react to people in a positive way, to say like, oh, that's really cool that that LinkedIn comment out of nowhere turned into a deal, that gets celebrated, that story gets told again. Now you're building up that culture. And then you can start to shift into, systematizing it, and hopefully not too much, but like, building that into how you interact as a brand with your employees, and externally.
Yeah, no, I think no, that's a good example. Like, and when I just talked to Matt Bolian about this, the ninth pillar of value first is about culture and the
Mhm.
conformity trap, and metrics can often play a role in creating that thing. But starting like from the place, like what happened? Why did that deal close in 2.5 hours? Like what act like, and taking those moments of like closed one debriefs, like
Yeah.
why the hell are we not doing those more? And instead of like, this is where we rely on the metrics. Okay, this is our system selling us this.
Mhm.
And it's like, no, talk to people. Like, what actually happened to win this deal, right? And then find all of the things that are like, well, there's no way we're measuring that.
Yeah.
It would be cool if that would happen every time, but there's no way we can control that thing that happened to exist here. Like this network plus this network plus this network
Right.
plus this thing happened that day, and you know, it'll help you understand like how much qualitative stuff comes into play when you know that word of mouth activity and referral activity is almost always the highest qualified, like quickest to close, revenue there is.
Yeah.
Right. So taking a step back and understanding, how the revenue gets generated right now with the whole team too, not just with the salesperson who sold the deal, right? Get the whole team involved. Anybody that person talked to internally to help close that deal should be involved in that conversation, because there's, multiple voices to be heard,
Yeah.
to understand. Like even when it's the customer success person or the customer support person that the salesperson called to say like, hey, is anything bad happening like with this customer because they just came in? Like all of that starts to matter, and we got to take it into account so we can bring like one customer team together.
Right.
And that's like that concept alone, as we close, like of wanting alignment across the customer experience.
Yeah.
The reason we can't get to like revenue teams or customer teams is because we don't know how to get out of these metrics traps.
Yeah.
Right.
So true.
When in reality, like, that when people can show up, and this is where like in industrial spaces, there's often like a full funnel account manager.
Yeah.
That is the relationship person the whole way.
Yeah.
Right. And we're on the way back to that, because AI enables that more than any other thing. And when you can give that, like all of a sudden, worry about alignment, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because this person isn't able to do all the things, but everybody gets to show up like that. So hopefully this was helpful just to get the conversation started. We know it's
hard.
It's hard, right? You've got every system you have in place is driving in the other direction. So hopefully this gave you some words to start to talk about it internally in a meaningful way, so that you can enable some change, right? Especially as you get access to AI tools. What you want to avoid is just continued optimization of things that in your soul are not working anymore, right? So thank you so much, Danielle. That's great as always. Tomorrow, we're going to be wrapping up the series with Tony Dowling and the authority trap related to value first leadership. So if you're listening or watching, audit one metric out there that might be creating team competition instead of collaboration, and share what you find in the comments. Until next time, thanks again, Danielle.
Thank you. See you soon.
Have a great day, everybody.